Welcome, everyone, to the Brethren of the Morning Star YouTube channel. I'm your host, Magister Cankerworm. Today's topic is protective magical circles for theistic Satanists and Diabolists. There's an understanding among many sectors of the theistic Satanist world that we do not cast protective circles prior to ritual. The argument is that magical circles are for right-hand magicians who wish to shield themselves from the infernal powers they attempt to conjure. This line of thinking has its foundation with LaVey's The Satanic Bible, in which he castigates those who hide behind protective circles in a couple of instances. Quote, during white magical ceremonies, the practitioners stand within a pentagram to protect themselves from the evil forces which they call upon for help. To the Satanist, it seems a bit two-faced to call on these forces for help while at the same time protecting yourself from the very powers you have asked for assistance. The Satanist realizes that only by putting himself in league with these forces can he fully and unhypocritically utilize the powers of darkness to his best advantage. End quote. Elsewhere, LaVey says again, quote, the treaders of the path of white light are truly cold and dead. No wonder these tittering pustules of mystical wisdom must stand within protective circles to bind the evil forces in order to keep themselves safe. End quote. LaVey's point is clear. Protective circles are for cowards and hypocrites. He associates them with so-called white magicians who, to LaVey's mind, are fooling themselves into thinking that their magical work is altruistic and does only good and never harm. For those that accept his way of thinking, conjuring infernal powers behind a protective circle is a bit like inviting someone to your house, only to insist they never go beyond the front porch. For a long time, I accepted this line of thought without question. Diabolists work with demons, and if protective circles were meant to keep demons at bay, I should abstain from using them. Simple enough, right? But I've come to change my mind on this topic over the past couple of years, and now recommend people employ protective circles in their own work. There are multiple reasons for this change, and I want to lay them out for viewers here, so they can decide where they stand for themselves. First, while LaVey's logic perhaps stands to reason within his own system, I am not sure it fits entirely well with the theological framework of explicitly theistic Satanism. While it seems undeniably true that LaVey became more consistently atheistic with age, earlier work is inconsistent at times with regard to whether greater magic involves access to an external force or if it is an entirely psychological affair. LaVey was not always a systematic thinker, so it is possible to point to passages in the Satanic Bible which assume a psychological model of magic, and others which suggest a spirit model or an etheric one at least. His thoughts on protective circles are one of these areas. Is the circle unnecessary because you are really only dealing with powers within your own psyche? I think most modern Church of Satan members would say yes. Or is the circle unnecessary because the powers you are courting are, in theory, allied with you already? The passage I quote above suggests this, but it is hard to say whether this language of, quote, evil forces is meant to be taken literally or metaphorically. If greater magic is nothing more than symbolic play, it stands to reason a protective circle is not only unnecessary, but perhaps even counterproductive. You can't dive into your hidden psychological depths and hide from them at the same time, so casting a symbolic barrier could defeat the purpose of the ritual. For the theistic Satanist, however, the spiritual powers they seek to interact with are not only real, but understood to be external to the practitioner. And Diabolists should consider that if there are spiritual powers who are in their favor, there is no reason to assume there aren't spiritual beings who would wish to do them harm. While I can't recall there is anywhere that LaVey states this explicitly, an examination of the Satanic Bible will reveal that his system is largely a dualistic one. There are the powers of life or nature, of strength, all of which he associates with the devil. On the other hand, the powers of weakness, hypocrisy, and self-deceit, which are primarily associated with the Abrahamic God, but are present in religions like Buddhism as well. In other words, the Satanic Bible operates from the perspective that there is a right hand and a left hand, and that anything not on the side of the former is assumed to be the latter. We see this most obviously in LaVey's list of the infernal names. The entries include Adrimelech, a Sumerian devil, Apuk, a Mayan devil, Amon, an Egyptian ram-headed god of life and reproduction, Coyote, American Indian devil, Metzli, an Aztec goddess of night, Rimon, a Syrian devil, and Thoth, an Egyptian god of magic. What do these names all have in common? Some are gods, some are apparently malevolent spirits. The fact that they aren't Christian seems to be the most obvious common denominator. In other words, what they all have in common is, to my mind, not necessarily a lot. The Brethren of the Morning Star adheres to a henotheist theology. Henotheism is, in a sense, a middle ground between mono and polytheism. Like polytheism, it believes in the existence of many divine beings, but more like monotheism, it reserves worship for only a select few. There are many gods and goddesses, but as Diabolists, not all of them are our gods and goddesses. Just as in real life, we believe there are multiple factions and wills at work in the spirit world, some friendly to us, others ambivalent, and some hostile. This is the flaw in LaVey's thinking on protective magic circles. It makes no allowance for the fact that there are spiritual powers that might be our enemies, whether because of their own allegiances or their sheer chaotic nature. And the experience of many occultists for the past couple centuries is that magical work tends to attract the attention of many different sorts of entities, some wanted and some most certainly not. As Diabolists, we believe we have a spiritual enemy. The forces of Jehovah will try to thwart and undermine your spiritual work, because to take up the devil's name is to choose a side in a cosmic battle. Christians understand this. Diabolists should as well. Furthermore, there are other spiritual beings who, whether because of their nature or agendas, are not your friend. This isn't to say all of them are evil per se. Some are only mischievous, or perhaps a mild annoyance. The point stands, though. Sealing your space from unwanted intruders only stands to reason. How to go about erecting such a protective circle is a question I leave individual Diabolists to determine on their own. There are instructions in the revised edition of the Book of Infernal Prayer for anyone interested, but honestly, any introductory book on Wicca or ceremonial magic would have perfectly acceptable instructions for how to do it. I would recommend Theistic Satanists not use the Golden Dawn's lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, otherwise known as the LBRP, as it calls on a number of Abrahamic entities. But you could certainly rewrite it. There are any number of such revisions just a Google search away. The only real requirement is that you pair some physical action with the visualization of casting a circle of energy that you know inwardly to be a barrier between you and anything that would do you harm. Include a prayer or invocation if you like, but it isn't necessary. What is necessary is that by the end of whatever ritual action you take, you know yourself to be the master and defender of the space you have set aside and declared inviolate. This is why the circle is best often marked out using the sword or dagger. It communicates quite clearly how any unwelcome presence will be dealt with. In this sense, we are very much in alignment with LaVey's 4th and 11th rules of the earth, to wit, if a guest in your lair annoys you, treat him cruelly and without mercy. And, when walking in open territory, bother no one. If someone bothers you, ask him to stop. If he does not stop, destroy him.